Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're cracking open a classic text to explore a truly unique and, well, frankly, quite strange subject.
That's right. We're looking at William Boericke's Homeopathic Materia Medica, specifically his section on Anacardium Orientale.
Which is also known as the marking nut, right?
Exactly. The marking nut.
So, our mission here really is to unpack how Boericke describes this. It's not just a list, is it? It feels like he's painting this very vivid picture of a certain type of person.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost narrative. You get these really unusual mental states, physical quirks.
Yeah.
It sets a very specific scene right from the start.
It really does. You get a sense this isn't your average everyday profile.
No, not at all. It's a constellation of symptoms that, when you see them together in this text, they form this really distinct, sometimes kind of baffling pattern.
Okay, so let's start where Boericke starts. What's the kind of core profile? Who is this anacardium patient he's describing?
Well, he often tags them as neurasthenics, that term, neurasthenia. In this context, it points towards a kind of nervous exhaustion, fatigue.
Nervous exhaustion, okay, and that's paired with physical issues.
Yes. Specifically, he mentions nervous dyspepsia, indigestion, basically. But there's a really key detail there, almost paradoxical.
Yes, I remember reading this. It's about eating, isn't it?
Exactly. This is crucial according to the text. The dyspepsia, the indigestion associated with anacardium, is actually relieved by eating food.
Which is so counterintuitive.
Right. Boericke calls it a sure indication, often verified. It's like a hallmark symptom in his description. Eating usually makes indigestion worse, but here, better.
That's a huge flag then, according to this source. Okay, so nervous exhaustion, this strange digestive relief. What about the mental state? What's going on upstairs?
Well, there's quite a bit going on there. The text describes things like impaired memory, definite depression, irritability, and a really strong aversion to work. Any kind of work, really, but maybe especially mental effort. And alongside that, a real lack of self-confidence.
Right. And didn't the source also mention something about the senses being affected, like weakened?
Yes, exactly. A weakening or diminution, it says, of smell, sight, and hearing.
Okay.
And interestingly, Boericke notes these conditions are often found in people with a history of syphilis. That's mentioned. And also, importantly, the symptoms are often intermittent. They come and go.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Nervous state, weird digestion, memory issues, weakened senses. But the source goes deeper, doesn't it? Into some really specific and sometimes bizarre mental territory.
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets particularly fascinating. The mental symptoms described are quite striking.
Let's really get into that. What's the most sort of standout feature?
I'd say it's this very specific fixed idea. The sensation of having two persons or wills inside oneself.
Wow, like being possessed. Two wills fighting.
Kinda, yeah. This internal conflict, this duality, is presented as just a core mental feature. It's a powerful image of inner struggle.
Definitely. And beyond that internal split, what about altered perceptions? Hallucinations?
Yes, the text mentions hallucinations. And also clairaudience, hearing voices. Sometimes voices from far away, or even voices of the dead.
Whoa, okay. So a potential disconnect from reality there. Is there also like a general anxiety?
Yes, very much so. Anxiety is prominent, especially in notes when walking this feeling as if pursued.
Sounds terrifying.
It does. And there's profound melancholy, hypochondriasis, that excessive worry about being seriously ill.
Right. And the text gets quite specific about how this inner turmoil comes out, doesn't it, in terms of language?
It really does. It mentions a tendency to use violent language and even an irresistible desire to swear and curse.
An irresistible desire, so almost compulsive.
That's the impression, yes. This impulsivity seems tied into the whole picture of mental agitation.
It's quite a contrast, though, that impulse towards, well, darkness, compared to the lack of confidence mentioned earlier.
It is. And there are other cognitive issues noted too, besides the impaired memory, which gets another mention, highlighting its importance. The text talks about brain fag, mental exhaustion, difficulty concentrating, and just general absent-mindedness.
Okay. And how does all this internal state, how does it play out in their interactions with other people?
Well, according to the source, they're described as very easily offended.
Touchy.
Okay. There's a sense of malice mentioned. The text even says they seem bent on wickedness, which is quite strong language.
Yeah, it is.
And this is paired with that lack of confidence, not just in themselves, but also suspicion towards others. Very distrustful.
So it sounds like relationships would be really difficult, a breakdown in trust.
Definitely. And the text doesn't stop there. It even touches on more severe states.
Like what?
Well, it includes descriptions that sound like they could fit senile dementia, and it specifically notes an absence of all moral restraint.
Absence of moral restraint.
Wow.
So it really sketches out a potential path of decline in this profile.
It seems to, yeah. It highlights a trajectory of mental and behavioral deterioration.
Okay, so we have this really complex, often quite dark mental picture. The split will, the altered perceptions, anxiety, anger, cognitive problems, moral issues. Now let's shift to something physical, but equally strange, described in the source, this feeling of a plug.
Yes, the plug sensation.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the most unique and frequently mentioned physical symptoms for anacardium in Boericke's text.
A plug, like literally feeling plugged up.
Essentially, yes. It's described as a pressing pain or just a sensation as from a plug that shows up in different parts of the body.
And the source lists quite a few places.
It does. You see it mentioned for the head like a pressing pain as from a plug. The eyes pressure like a plug. The ears, same thing as from a plug. Also the chest, the intestines pain, as if dull plug were pressed. Even the glutei, pressure as from a plug, and the rectum feeling powerless as if plugged up. It's this consistent, recurring, very odd sensation.
It's such a specific and unusual image. And there was something similar, wasn't there? A feeling like a band.
Right, exactly. A sensation described as a band, often in the arms or legs, the extremities. The text specifically mentions the knees feeling bandaged or even paralyzed.
Wow, bandaged knees.
Okay, so these really distinctive physical feelings alongside that complex mental state. Let's loop back to the digestive system for a second because we have to hit that main symptom again.
Absolutely. Can't emphasize it enough. Beyond the general weak digestion, the fullness, bloating, that empty feeling, the absolute defining characteristic, the sure indication, according to Boericke, is that eating relieves the dyspepsia.
Eating makes it better. Okay, got it. It's a core physical keynote here. And did it mention anything else about eating itself, like the act of eating?
Yes, a tendency to choke easily or to swallow food and drinks too quickly, hastily. Okay. Moving on down, the rectum and bowels, another area with quite detailed symptoms described.
Yeah, the source goes into detail there. Inactive bowels, it says. An urge to go, but it's ineffectual. Nothing happens.
Which ties back to that plugged feeling, I suppose.
Exactly. The rectum is described as feeling powerless or as if plugged up. And there's also mention of spasmodic constriction of the sphincter muscle, making it hard to pass even soft stool.
Sounds really uncomfortable.
Definitely. And it adds more details. Itching, moisture around the anus, sometimes hemorrhage with the stool, and painful hemorrhoids.
So, a pretty thorough picture of bowel issues. What about the skin? That seemed prominent too.
It is, yes. The source emphasizes intense itching. Various eruptions are listed to eczema, especially linked with that mental irritability we talked about.
Ah, the mind-skin connection again.
Right. Also, vesicular eruptions like little blister swelling and urticaria, which is hives.
And didn't the text make a specific comparison for the skin issues? Something it resembled.
It did, yeah. It says the eruption looks a lot like poison oak. And in fact, it goes on to say that Anacardium Orientale has actually been found useful as an antidote to poison oak.
Huh, okay. Any other skin things mentioned?
Let's see. Lichen planus, which is an itchy rash. Neurotic eczema, so eczema linked to stress or nerves. Warts, specifically on the hands. And even ulcer formation on the forearm.
Okay. And the senses? We touched on them being weakened, but did Boericke give more specifics?
He did. For vision, it mentions indistinct sight, things looking fuzzy or objects appearing farther away than they are. For hearing, being hard of hearing, sometimes with that plug sensation in the ears again. And for smell, a perverted or altered sense of smell, things not smelling right.
Boericke's text is so detailed, isn't it? It lists symptoms across almost every system. We probably don't need every single one, but are there other notable ones that kind of jump out?
Well, there's vertigo, dizziness, scalp issues are mentioned. In the mouth, things like painful little blisters, a really bad fetid breath odor, a feeling of a swollen tongue, burning lips. The face might look pale, with dark circles, blue rings under the eyes. There are some male and female specific symptoms listed too. Respiratory stuff like pressure or oppression in the chest. Coughs triggered by specific things like talking or after getting angry or after eating.
Ah, triggered coughs.
Yeah. Heart symptoms like palpitations, sometimes linked to the weak memory, or happening in older people who also have a cold, chorizia. Back symptoms, dull pressure between the shoulders, stiff neck.
And the extremities, arms and legs.
Nerve pain, neuralgia, weakness, cramps. those warts on the hand skin, swollen fingers, and that bandaged or paralyzed feeling we mentioned, particularly in the knees.
That's a huge range of potential physical complaints described there. So finally, let's look at what the source says makes all this better or worse, the modalities, and how it relates Anacardium Orientale to other things.
Okay, the key modalities listed are symptoms get worse from applying hot water,
Worse from hot water. Okay.
and they get better from eating. There it is again, that core digestive point.
Right.
Also better when lying on the side, and better from rubbing the affected part.
Okay, better from eating, lying on the side, rubbing, worse from hot water. And what about connections to other substances in Boericke's view? Antidotes or comparisons?
He lists several possible antidotes: Grindelia, coffee, juglans, rus, eucalyptus. And for comparison, he mentions Anacardium occidentale, that's the cashew nut, but he's careful to point out it's different.
How so?
Occidental is described with different skin issues: erysipelas, facial eruptions, cracked skin on the soles. So, similar name, related plant, but a distinct symptom picture, especially the skin, compared to Orientale.
I see. Any others for a comparison?
Yeah, he lists roostox again: Cypripedium, Chelidonium, Xerophyllum platina, which he notes is said to follow well after Anacardium, and interestingly, Sirius serpentina,
Why that one specifically?
because it's noted for its connection to the desire to swear.
Ah. So it brings us right back around to those really intense mental symptoms we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It shows how Boericke was grouping these remedies based on sometimes very specific, even unusual key characteristics or keynotes.
It really does. So, okay, stepping back from this deep dive into Boericke's description, what really stands out is this incredibly specific, sometimes quite peculiar picture he paints.
Absolutely. It's this profile of a neurasthenic state marked by that very strange dyspepsia that gets better from eating,
Yep.
combined with really profound mental turmoil. You know, the fractured will, the dark impulses, the memory problems, the lack of moral restraint he describes.
And physically, those recurring, very distinctive sensations, especially that feeling of a plug showing up all over and the band sensation, too.
Yeah. I think sticking closely to Boericke's own language and descriptions, like we've tried to do, really helps paint the detailed picture of his specific view of this substance. It's a very particular symptom complex he associated with it.
It really is. So here's a thought for you, the listener, to mull over based on this text. Given these vivid, sometimes really bizarre sensations like the plug and the intense mental states described for Anacardium Orientale here, what might this specific text suggest about the connection between the mind and the physical body? How does Boericke's description portray that relationship between, say, a nervous state and the manifestation of these really unusual physical feelings? Definitely gives you something to think about.